Embossed with Bale. I know what you're thinking. Where on earth did I come up with such a catchy name for my YouTube channel? Well, today I'm going to tell you where it came from and why I've removed it. But let's go find a place to sit down. Whoa! Well, there we go. That's comfortable. Okay. So the phrase embossed with Bale comes from the Fairy Queen, which is a book that I think we haven't covered nearly enough on this channel. In Book 1, Canto 9 of the Fairy Queen, a knight named Redcross is riding along through fairyland with a gal named Una. And as they go, they see another knight riding towards them very quickly, and he seems to be afraid. In Spenser's words, he says, "So as they travailed, lo they gan espy an armed knight towards them gallop fast, that seemed from some feared foe to fly, or other grisly thing that him aghast." So this knight is terrified and riding towards them to get away from something. And as he gets closer, they realize that he's missing his helmet, and his hair is standing on end with terror. Also, around his neck is a noose. Now, Redcross tries to stop him and convince him that it's okay and that he should tell him what's going on, and it takes a while for him to do that. Eventually, the terrified knight says that he and another knight, named Sir Terwin, were riding along a bit depressed and down in the dumps when they saw someone coming towards them. In the words of the scared knight, he says, "As on the way together we did fare, we met that villain, God from him me bless, that cursed wight, from whom I escaped whilere, a man of hell that calls himself Despair." So Despair approaches them and casually asks how they're doing and what's going on. But when Despair hears that they are depressed, he begins an assault. The scared knight continues by saying, "Which when he knew, and felt our feeble hearts embossed with bale and bitter biting grief, with wounding words and terms of foul reprief, he plucked from us all hope of due relief, that erst us held in love of lingering life. Then hopeless, heartless, gan the cunning thief persuade us die, to stint all further strife. To me he lent this rope, to him a rusty knife." Now, I won't get into the grisly details, but I'll say that Sir Terwin doesn't make it out alive. But this is a bit of a dramatic tale. What does that have to do with me? Well, let's go back to the phrase embossed with Bale. In my wonderful edition, it has a footnote for the phrase, and it says that means that these two knights were stricken with psychological pain. But it adds that it is a hunting metaphor, referring to a hunted animal that is so exhausted from running that it's flecked with foam and beads of sweat. And these beads of sweat are embossed on its hide, or raised on its hide so you can see them. So it's basically a hounded animal that is just exhausted. And so for these two knights, they were essentially run ragged with grief. But for me, it was more of a physical exhaustion. I've alluded to the fact that I had a rather toxic and stifling work environment during my PhD, but on top of that, I also had a number of undiagnosed health issues that just complicated things greatly. Some of these things were probably due to my stressful work environment, but others were definitely due to a genetic lottery. But in either case, I felt I was rather non-functional. To give an example, on my best days, I felt like I had been beaten about my head a few times, such that my whole brain was a bruise and therefore wouldn't really work very well. But on my worst days, it felt like there was a railroad spike driven through my temple that was splitting my head open and making it not work at all, to the point that I would be like clumsy and slurring my speech. And this produced a kind of physical despair. I began to wonder if ever I would be functional enough to contribute to society. And all this time I thought it was solely due to my oppressive work environment. So I thought I would combat it by revisiting some of the beauty and health that I remembered from the literature of my undergrad days. And to keep myself accountable, I decided I'd make videos and put them on YouTube, although I wasn't planning on making them public ever. I just wanted to have a tangible product of my efforts to become healthy again. And I'm happy to say that I am much healthier now and much more functional, which is great. Part of that's due to the time I've spent investing in this channel, but another part of it's due to the medical intervention and finally getting diagnoses and stuff. They ended up chiseling a bit of bone out of my face, and that helped greatly, and a bunch of other things that I've just kind of figured out along the way. I am now much better and no longer embossed with Bale. So goodbye to that channel name. But what is a new channel name, you might ask? but probably not because you can see it below. It's Another's Bread. And I'll say I didn't like that name at first because it sounds a little too devotional, and I'm not really a devotional channel. But when I tell you the origin of it, I think you'll see why it is absolutely perfect. It comes from George MacDonald's realistic novel called Thomas Wingfold Curate. And in this book, Thomas Wingfold is a pastor of sorts, but he realizes that he's having a crisis of faith. And his gut instinct is to just quit being a pastor right off. But one of his friends tells him that he should be honest with his congregation, but remain a pastor if they'll let him, as he works through these things. And instead of sharing his own insights because he's struggling with them, he can share the insights of other people he has read, or that his friend will suggest to him. In his own words, he says, "A man, I say, who does not feel in his soul that he has something to tell his people should straightway turn his energy to the providing of such food for them as he finds feeds himself. In other words, if he has nothing new in his own treasure, let him bring something old out of another man's. If his own soul is unfed, he can hardly be expected to find food for other people, and has no business in any pulpit." Now Thomas the pastor says to his friend, "Then, do you intend that a man should make up his sermons with the books he reads?" And his friend responds, "Yes, if he cannot do better." Now remember, I'm a biologist, so I have some creative writing and such that I do of my own, but I wouldn't say it's really worth sharing, nor do I have a lot of deep literary insights that are my own generation. But I can share with you people who have been feeding me. After thinking about it a little bit, Thomas comes back to his friend and says, "You would have a man who cannot be original deal honestly in second-hand goods. Or perhaps rather, he should say to the congregation, 'This is not homemade bread I offer you, but something better. I got it from this or that baker's shop. I have eaten of it myself, and it has agreed well with me, and done me good. If you chew it well, I don't doubt that you also will find it good.'" And so that's what I want to do with my channel now that I'm feeling better, and even more so now that I'm feeling better. I want to continue to share the nourishment I've been getting from other bakeries, essentially, and give it to you, hoping that it will nourish you also. Anyway, thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Oh yeah, and I know I'm overdue for posting another of MacDonald's sermons, but I actually have a paper that I'm working on, and that's taking all of my extra reading time. That paper is due in like a month and a half, I think, and so when that's done, I'll be able to have a lot more free time to parse those sermons. They're always a lot of work to digest and try to encapsulate. So bear with me, and I'll try to post some more smaller things that don't require quite so much preparation as those. Alright, see ya. Wow. Woo. Alright, let's go get these ticks off me.